Anyway, I just watched 2 films this week. One of them is called, Practical Magic, and this film called The Black Phone. And I used to be really big into horror films when I was a teenager, and in part of my 20s. I have to say I'm not into really the slasher film genre because I'm like really sensitive to violence and gore and all that stuff. I used to not be, but as I've gotten deeper into spiritualism and metaphysics and everything, it doesn't feel right to me anymore. However, this film came out in 2021. It's called The Black Phone. It was actually based on a short story by Stephen King's son, Joe King, and he had this book of short stories, and one of them was about this kid who gets abducted by this stranger, this creepy guy. Yeah, he gets abducted by this really creepy guy that I guess owns a business that pretending to be a magician, and he's been abducting, children, or particularly young boys in this film, and kills them. He did this 5 of them in the movie. I don't know about necessarily a short story, I don't remember, but in the movie he had captured these boys. I don't want to go into what was done or whatever, but anyway, he captures this kid who's the main character named Finney, and Finney's sister, his younger sister, is a psychic, and she has these prophetic dreams. So in a way, yeah, she's psychic. It's been established in the film that she's psychic. What they don't really establish very clearly is that he is also psychic. He's clairaudient. And basically, he can, clairaudient, if you guys don't know, is when somebody can psychically, they can't hear with their physical ear, or they can hear with their physical ear, but they hear it in their mind as if it were sound. And so Finney gets captured by the grabber, and he ends up, just to give you a short recap, he ends up captured by the grabber. He's in this basement, it's soundproofed and everything, so there's almost pretty much no way of escaping. And then there's this phone on the wall. What's interesting about this phone is that Finney hears it ringing, and anyways, he hears it ringing, and he answers it. And throughout the film, the 5 victims of the grabber end up trying to show him how to get out of there. And as I said, they never established that Finney is clairaudient, but they do, but it's pretty obvious that he is in the film. And him and his sister's mother, who passed away prior to the start of the film, like their dad doesn't really want to talk about it. He's like an alcoholic, and anyway, he ends up, punishing the sister for, saying that she has these dreams and stuff. But I think he was just mostly scared because he didn't want his daughter ending up like their mother. And it was alluded that the mother committed suicide. So anyway, that's probably a long recap. I shouldn't have gone on that long, but it's okay. I need to get more used to being on cameras and podcasts and all that stuff, because yeah, it's been a busy month. But anyway, so what I was going to say is that I watched The Black Phone and I watched Practical Magic, And the two things, I mean, these films are different genres, practical magic, it's a chick flick, drama, comedy, came out in 1998 about these two sisters that are witches. They come from a witch family. It's based off of a book by Alice Hoffman. And anyway, the point I'm making is that the two things that both of these films have in common is the bond between each of the siblings, which I think is just really fascinating because it's not just the sibling connection, but it's like an otherworldly sibling connection, because the two of them, or the two pairs of siblings, Finney and his sister Gwen, her name's Gwen, are both psychic. They both have, their abilities. Sally and Jillian in Practical Magic are both witches. They have, in a way, I think Sandra Bullock's character is clairaudient herself, because the one thing that these two pairs of siblings have in common is that if one of them's in trouble, they can both help each other. I mean, throughout the film, because this isn't much of a spoiler, but when Finney gets trapped, Gwen is trying her hardest to have dreams about her brother so she can find her brother. And her brother, she can hear him in dreams, like some of the conversations that he's having with some of the boys that he's talking to that were the former victims. Yeah, he can hear them through the phone. It's almost like she's picking up on a radio signal. And I think it's kind of the same thing with Sally and Jillian, which is fascinating to me. Because in a way, it just shows how strong these pairs of siblings are. Anyway, hold on. Somebody on my bike run. I'm on a busy street right now, so lots of cars going by and some people on their bikes and all that stuff. But there's not too many people that walk down this road, so that's a good thing. So I feel like I have a lot more space when I'm walking. Anyway, so yeah, back to what I was saying. Sibling connections. Having this otherworldly connection. It's like, what the point I'm making is that sometimes the bond you have with people, whether it's your family members or a best friend or a romantic partner. And Christine, you and I both were talking about Chris and Anne, when we did the podcast about the film What Dreams May Come. Some connections go beyond the earthly plane, right? So anyway, what I found interesting about the both of these films is that there's that strong bond between both pairs of siblings and everything, and they hold on, going past people. Okay, anyway, so yeah, losing track of my thoughts right now. I'm also walking. It's like walking and chewing gum, which actually I did just chew a piece of gum earlier, and there's some cinnamon gum, but anyway. So yeah, okay, specifically these two films, I feel like that's what connects them, even though they are completely two different films, two different genres, two different vibes and everything. It's just interesting how we can each find a common thread and see what both universally have in common. So the point I'm making is that I'm going to be doing more videos talking about films like this. And yeah, it's interesting because at the end of both of well, for those of you that don't want to get spoiled, I would leave right now or shut this podcast off if you don't want to get spoiled, but I'm going to spoil the ending for both films. Okay, so in Practical Magic, end of the film, Jillian had been in trouble because she was with a guy that was very abusive, right? So they got together, this group of women, to banish Jillian's ex-boyfriend. And Jillian and Sally almost lost each other because Jillian had fallen, had lost her mind because the energy of her dead boyfriend wouldn't leave her alone. It's very interesting with the ending of The Black Phone, because in the ending of that film, the two siblings ended up finding each other because Gwen would not give up on finding her brother, and Finney, because of the five boys and that phone and that phone that he was talking to them from, they gave him all the tools he needed to escape himself. And so what ended up happening during that time, or during what ended up happening with in both films, is that there was, time that each of the siblings, had apart, and or they lost one another, or they, whatever the situation was, whether it was physical or mental or both, each sibling had lost themselves, and then, or lost, got lost from one another, and eventually ended up coming back, even though they still were in close proximity to each other. They still ended up coming back. So we're finding each other again, which is pretty fascinating when you think about it. So, man, it's not easy to walk and talk at the same time, especially because this whole walk is supposed to be me getting exercise and stuff, but I wanted to come on here and share this wisdom with you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and this podcast on that note. And I encourage you all, if you want to learn more about movies and energy, if you like the metaphysical, the spiritual, the witchy stuff, and you also like movies and film, I highly suggest you subscribe to my Substack. Also, if you look me up on YouTube under the Vibrant Cat Eye, you'll also find me on there. And I also set this podcast up on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. This will be uploaded to YouTube as well. So, anybody has any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section of whatever platform you happen to be listening to this on. And anyway, I will see you all soon. I'll probably do another live later on because I was thinking of doing a oracle reading or a card reading in the greenhouse later on either these films or a different film. So anyways, y'all take care and have a wonderful night. Bye.